Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Band Rants channel, your home for NFL projections, predictions, and of course, your periodic rant. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about why all 8 division leaders in the NFL, both in AFC and NFC combined, are where they are, and whether I think they'll be able to ride that till the end of the year or even till December, and why or why not. I'm also going to be going over my Week 10 final picks, and I won't take too long on that because the point of this video is the division leaders. But before I get into all of that, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and of course, happy Veterans Day, because I'm pretty sure that's when this video will get published. So we'll go ahead and get started. So we'll start with probably the most surprising number 1 seed in my opinion, not because of any bad reason, but just because the AFC is so loaded with talent, the Tennessee Titans. Why they're on top of their division and number 1, not only in their division but in the AFC, is because they play with more grit than I think almost anyone in the league is playing with right now. They play with heart and grit. The Titans have just looked like a team that you wouldn't even know that arguably their best player on offense is injured. You wouldn't even know it with that statement win that they got over the Rams on Sunday Night Football in Los Angeles, might I add. The Titans have just looked like a team reborn. I mean, that Week 1 loss to the Cardinals, that's probably, so at the time it was a Sophie's Choice kind of match to call. I mean, you could argue that you could make a case for Tennessee to win that game, but Tennessee has looked dominant. They've been able to win big on-paper games against the Bills and Chiefs, who they've looked like shells of their former selves last year, from this year compared to last year. But Tennessee, 1, they don't make the schedule, and number 2, the fact that the Bills and Chiefs look different is sort of a them problem, not a Titans problem. And the Titans have been able to take advantage of a lot of these things. And you could argue that Week 4 loss was their pants down loss, which I've already covered what that is. Basically, every good team has a loss that they don't expect, where they get basically embarrassed and no one expected it from a mile away. But it doesn't make them a bad team. It just means that they do what every good team does, have that one upset loss. Tennessee is going to be good for a while, and I actually do think they're going to be not necessarily in the number 1 seed, because it's hard to predict at this time of year, but I do think they'll be leading the AFC South. Baltimore, why they're on top? You could argue Lamar Jackson. I'm going to say it's a combination of the offense and the head coach. And why the head coach? I think the Ravens arguably have the best head coach in the division. And a lot of Steelers fans will say, oh, what about Mike Tomlin? And Mike Tomlin's good in a different sense, because Mike Tomlin is just more calculated in terms of what he's able to do to motivate his team. Whereas John Harbaugh is more of a somebody that the team really plays hard for, in a sense that he knows how to adjust when serious injuries happen. And people talk about when the Steelers had Ben Roethlisberger out for the year and they still went 8 wins and 8 losses, but that was a lot of that had to do with their defense. And if they had a lot of defensive injuries, they weren't finishing that way. But the Ravens are 6-2 for a reason, and they have the number 2 offense in the league, which helps. But it's also because they've been able to adapt. Losing all your running backs, losing one of your best defensive players in Marcus Peters, those things all are going to add up. And you also lost your blindside tackle for the entire season. But yet the Ravens have still been able to make it extremely interesting. I mean, that Week 1 loss to the Raiders could have easily been a win. They could easily be sitting at 7-1 right now. That Bengals loss was probably their one lopsided loss that they've had so far. But the rest of these games, statement games. I mean, that game against the Vikings, the Colts, those went to overtime and the Ravens were able to pull it out. And that big statement win against the Chargers, that's a big win. That, narrow victory against the Chiefs, that was a statement win. Baltimore is doing big things, and are they going to be leading the division by January? Their division's a little tougher than Tennessee's. For now, I think they will, but I think it's going to get really interesting come the end of December, middle to end of December. I think it's going to be very interesting to watch that division. The Chargers. The Chargers are on top simply because Justin Herbert has really looked great. in his second year, which I also predicted that to be the case. I think Justin Herbert, I said, would look better than Joe Burrow in his rookie season. I'd also said that he'd be taking big steps in year 2, and he has. Now, the Chargers are on a little bit of a bumpy road for the last couple of games. They're 1-2 in their last 3, but they've also been doing really good things. They're undefeated in their division, respectfully. They're 2-0 against teams that were very favored to do very well. Kansas City and the Raiders. And other than that loss against the Baltimore Ravens, you could argue the Chargers could even be sitting at a better record. I think the Chargers are better than 5-3, but 5-3 is not terrible in this league right now. And do I think they're still going to be leading in January? It's very possible, but I actually think the Raiders are going to take the lead. I really do. I think the Raiders are going to have a resurgence in the second half of the year, and they've already been pretty good, but I think they're just going to do better. Buffalo is next, and Buffalo is 5-3. They're on top because of their defense. They have the number 1 overall defense, and that matters, especially when you're facing teams like Kansas City, and you have teams like New England on the docket, and teams like the Saints and Tampa with decent offenses. But Buffalo is on top because of that, but also their division, with the exception of New England, is fairly easy too. I mean, they've had 2 Dolphins games, which are basically bye weeks at this point. They still have 2 Jets games, which are including one on Sunday, which I expect Buffalo to win fairly easily. But the Patriots are not the punching bags last year. This year, they're not that. And New England has been playing with a lot more grit too, so expect that division to be very close, within maybe 1 or 2 games. I think New England is going to make it really interesting. Buffalo has not looked like themselves. I don't know what's going on with the offense. They've looked very stagnant. They haven't had that same burst last year, this year. Meanwhile, New England is playing with a lot more grit. I'm not going to say New England wins the division, but I'm not going to say Buffalo wins it either. That's a pure toss-up, in my opinion. Now, looking over at the NFC, Arizona is on top because arguably they've had the best offseason in the entire NFL, and they've been able to utilize that. Now, J.J. Watt getting hurt for the season is going to hurt any team. I don't care who you are. But Arizona's got enough playmakers on other sides of the football, on offense and defense to a certain extent, that it doesn't really matter. I mean, this team has a third-place schedule. They are looking really good, and that loss to Green Bay was not one-sided whatsoever. And I think Arizona is going to have a really good shot at this rate of winning the division. I mean, they've got a couple of very winnable games coming up against Seattle and Carolina. And, of course, there's a Detroit game left on the docket. There's a game against the Bears, which could be a pretty cool shootout to watch. Even if they lose the rematch with the Rams, I think the Cardinals are in a much better place to win the division. But again, much like Patriots-Bills, it's a pure toss-up. But I do have more faith in Arizona winning the division than I would Buffalo winning the division. Next is Green Bay. Long story short, Green Bay, Tampa, Dallas, they were all my picks to win the division at the beginning of the year. They're still my picks now. But why they're on top? Very simply. Green Bay is on top because of Aaron Rodgers. Let's call a spade a spade. Green Bay is on top because of Aaron Rodgers. You could argue that week 1 loss to the Saints was a lopsided, you could even argue that was an upset game. But Green Bay has not lost a single game since then with Aaron Rodgers. He didn't play against Kansas City, and he might not even play next week. Now, this could be Aaron Rodgers' swan song in Green Bay. Everyone seems to think so, including myself. But don't count the Packers out of another NFC Championship game this year, and I do think the Packers will win the division fairly easily. Even if Minnesota makes it interesting in the wild card race, the division's very much out of reach right now. Tampa, even though Tampa is only a game ahead of the Saints, I do still think they're going to win the division. I do think that Tampa is a very good team. They're on top because they kept a lot of the same roster from last year, and Goatman is actually, I believe, leading the league in passing yards. It might have been different now because he didn't play this week, but he's actually probably having one of his best seasons in terms of QBR, in terms of touchdown interception ratio, and I think that Tampa will I don't know if they'll win the number 1 seed, but I do still think they're going to be either the 2 or the 3. I don't think they're going to fall to 4, especially with that tiebreaker over Dallas. But that's why Tampa's on top. And Dallas is on top because of their offense. They have the number 1 offense in the league. Baltimore has number 2. Dallas has number 1. And honestly, a big part of that is Dak Prescott. Now, I've been very tough on Dak Prescott because for the first 4 years, I didn't think he was the best thrower. And a lot of his success came at the behest of, in my opinion, Ezekiel Elliott. But that's changed this year. And I've said from day one, I'll always give someone the benefit of the doubt. And I never said Dak would be bad this year. I said, who knows how he'll come back off the leg. Maybe he'll do a bit better. And he actually is doing not only a bit better, but a lot better. And Dallas is on top because of Dak Prescott in the offense. They've looked totally transformed and in a good way. Dak's been putting up great numbers. He's been able to get the ball down the field. He's been able to make plays. And Dallas has a pretty favorable schedule. I mean, they have a third-place schedule. And yeah, they have the NFC South, but they've already had their toughest matchups, I think, early on. They've had the Bucks. They've had the Patriots, which they were able to win that game. And yes, they do still have a matchup with Kansas City. The Cardinals could be a pretty tough one. The Raiders, I think, is winnable in Jerry World, but we'll see. But their schedule is pretty favorable, which is why I think they're going to easily win the division. They were my pick to win it all in the NFC East in the preseason. They're still my pick now. So that's all about that. I'm going to do my Week 10 final picks pretty quick here. AFC. I expect Baltimore to win. That should be a no-brainer at this point. Same thing with the Bills over the Jets. I think they're going to bounce back. Colts over the Jags should be pretty much a gimme at this point. I know Jacksonville was able to win last week, but Jacksonville has not won a single road game. And the Colts, if we look at what they've been able to do, they've actually been pretty, they actually have a losing record at home coming into this game, but look at who they faced at home. I mean, they've had LA, Seattle, they've had, I believe, Tennessee was at home. They got swept by Tennessee, actually. But anyway, they've had a really tough home schedule. This is the home win they need. I would say the Patriots over the Browns. I don't expect Nick Chubb to play. I think the Patriots are going to have another statement win that they really need to have at this point to keep pace with the Bills. And then the Chiefs, I actually have the Raiders losing to the Raiders at home. I have them winning in Arrowhead, but not this one. I think the Chiefs are overdue for a bigger win. They have another one over Green Bay, but Aaron Rodgers wasn't playing. This is another confidence booster they need, but don't expect the Raiders to just lay down and die. The Raiders have actually been playing very well at home. You take that away, they're 3-1, whereas the Chiefs are 2-2 on the road. So that's not set in stone, but I am going to keep it. I am going to keep it for now. Saints and Titans. I still think Tennessee will be able to win this one. I know Tennessee has to lose a big game eventually. It's not going to be this one. And I just don't have faith that Trevor Siemian or somebody else is going to be able to keep pace with Tannehill. I think the Chargers will get a big victory over the Vikings. It's going to be weird seeing Minnesota fall to 3-6, but the Chargers, I think, are really overdue. I mean, they barely beat Philadelphia, but at home, they've actually not had, since that Raiders game, they haven't had a big win yet. Eagles, Denver, I think Denver wins this one too. I think Denver is actually being a pleasant surprise in the AFC West. I mean, they're actually looking, a little above average, but that's been good enough right now. And as much as I'm tempted to put the Lions as a huge upset, I just can't do it. I know one of these road teams has to win, but I'm fine with locking in these 4. Dallas over the Falcons should be a pretty easy call. Tampa over Washington. Cardinals over Panthers, pretty easy. I'm going to put LA over San Francisco. I think they're due for a bounce back after that loss at home. I also have, might I also add, LA is undefeated on the road. I also think Seattle beats Green Bay. I don't think Rodgers plays. And that's going to really shake things up a little bit, but that's what I have. Now, you could argue Minnesota pulls off an upset over the Chargers. That's reasonable. Or the Browns beat the Patriots. That's reasonable. But I think that I'm fine with this record right now. And if you guys like what you see in this video, Hopefully you do. I'll see you in the next one.